I'm Paul Van Squike, your Taekwondo guide, and this is Topic Tuesday. The concept of Topic Tuesday is simple. People go down in the comments, they leave questions about Taekwondo, and we talk about them. My producer at this point, Daryl, because Daryl leaves so many questions, leaves us our first topic, which is all about competition. So if you're new to competition or want to learn a little bit more about the goals, this Topic Tuesday is for you. And Daryl, thank you for this question. I'm going to recommend this Topic Tuesday to my students directly because it's a good way to start understanding how these competitions work. Daryl writes, hello. For this coming Topic Tuesday, could you review the current point system that WT is now using for sparring and/or patterns? What do you look for specifically while judging patterns or marking for testing? I'm aware first dan and up are well educated on what to look for by then. Not necessarily. Or should be, that's more like it. But I think it would be a nice topic for a change for beginners to have something to listen to and put in the back pocket, even though Dovobox don't have pockets. That's a good joke. I like that, Daryl. Yeah, I think that is a good topic to address for competitors. So I'm going to talk about specifically what goes on at WT-style Taekwondo competitions. All right, let's talk about Poomsae first and how Poomsae is scored if you're competing in sport Poomsae. Now, what's the difference? If you're not doing sport Poomsae, it's usually done by show of hands. In other words, you get up with another competitor, you both perform your form, and judges are looking at it, and they're not using a certain criteria to score it. They're just kind of looking for the person with the best presentation, power, athleticism, but they're not using the accuracy guidelines outlined by the WT for sport Poomsae. And then they raise their hand to the side that they think had the better form or Poomsae. And that's pretty common if you're not doing sport Poomsae, you're doing something like open Poomsae or traditional Poomsae. And this allows people who are part of Taekwondo schools that don't practice the specifics needed to do sport Poomsae to still compete. And I actually recommend that people start in that category even if they learn sport Poomsae, just to get their feet wet a little bit before getting into the more technical nitty-gritty sport Poomsae out there. Now, if you're doing the very highly technical sport Poomsae, here's what to look for. And I actually went directly to the WT site to get their most current rule set. Hasn't changed much since I last looked at it, but I'll link that in the description if you want to check it out and read it all in detail. All right, so here's how sport Poomsae scoring works. You start with 10 total points. Now, the judges have a remote. I've never actually held one of these remotes or been trained in how to use it, but they push buttons that essentially reduce your score. So you start with this perfect 10, and then your score gets reduced based on the errors that you make. At least that's my understanding. Now, here's how it breaks down. 40% of your score, so 4 points, is based on accuracy. That means the shape of the technique has to be technically accurate. Now, if you don't perform the technique accurately, like if your stance is off, or if you do a middle block but your hand is too high, this results in what's called a minor deduction, which is 1/10 of a point. Now, if you do something more egregious, like you do the wrong technique in the sequence at the wrong time, such as you put a key up in the wrong spot, this results in what's called a major deduction, which is about 1/3 of a point, or 0.3. So that whittles away at the 4 points, and they do that by pushing the buttons on the remote. Now, the rest of the score is broken into 3 different categories, all under the umbrella of presentation. And I'll go through that with you. I wrote it out here. So again, this is 6 points for presentation. 2 of these points are for speed and power. 2 are for control of power, speed, and rhythm, and 2 are for expression of energy. Now, obviously, these things are going to be a little bit more subjective. Now, you're trained to look for certain things in this area, but it's not quite as easy to wrap your head around as the technical accuracy side. For example, if I do a middle block, the height of my hand is supposed to correspond exactly with my shoulder. That's something you can measure and see very objectively. This stuff, you can train it, certainly. There is some amount of objectivity to it, but ultimately it's a little more difficult to pin down. And so I'm going to read some things. So for speed and power, you lose points if you start with too much power or tension and you basically slow the technique down or make it look unnatural. The way Poomsae is supposed to be performed is basically with this rhythm of slow to fast, slow, fast. Like you can think of when you crack a whip, you coil it, that's done a little bit more slowly, and then you snap your hand, that's done more quickly. Or like loading a bullet into the chamber. You load it and then bang, it fires. And that's kind of how the Taekwondo techniques work. You load your hands and then from the feet up, your body cracks into the apex position. And so if you accelerate the first movement, the staging of the hand, that's viewed as incorrect timing and power. Okay? So you can actually get deductions for that off of this 2 points that you get for speed and power. Then there's the control, speed, and rhythm. That has to do with the timing of techniques. So, some techniques are prescribed to be exact counts, 5-second count, 8-second count, and they're done slowly. And then some of it's just the matching of your tension like we talked about earlier. So kind of just overall rhythm, not rushing through the form or not doing the form too slowly. These are things they're watching for. Under expression of energy, I wrote down exactly what they mean by that in their own words here. This is their words from this WT document. So whether actions are presented with quality and dignity that come from mastering of the energy, size of body action, concentration, courage, sharpness, confidence, etc., according to the characteristics of actions of Poomsae. Some examples they give: eyesight, kiap, attitude, costume, confidence, etc., all through the actions of Poomsae based on the performer's physique and characteristics shall be evaluated. Here's an example of deductions that can occur under the expression of energy category. So points shall be deductive if actions are not vivid, connecting actions are not big enough for the performer's physique, performance is made in the same rhythm all the time without quality and dignity, and eyesight, kiap, and confidence, etc., are not expressed perfectly. So I wanted to read that in its exact wording because you can see some of those things are, to some extent or another, a little bit more subjective. But I think we can all gather a sense of what that means and score within the spirit of that sensibility. Now, if you want to read this document in its entirety, again, I have linked it down in the description. It's really good to go through if you're into sport Poomsae, or even if you're just looking to improve your Poomsae in general. It's good to know what the ideal should be and some of the pitfalls you want to avoid when you perform. So that is what is looked for in sport Poomsae. And so that's generally what I look for when I teach students and when I do belt gradings and so forth as well. Because I try to fall under that set of guidelines so that if students do want to compete, they're already in line with what the guidelines are. All right, let's talk about sparring. So, sport Taekwondo I like to think of it like boxing with the legs. It's really designed to emphasize the skill of dexterous kicking. Here's how the scoring works. Okay, the scoring areas are the chest guard, the electronic chest guard, and the electronic headgear, helmet, or face, which should register if it's hit just from the movement, but sometimes the judges need to make corrections there if that's allowed in that particular tournament's rule set. So, scoring. If you punch the chest guard and do it with trembling shock, then you may be awarded 1 point. Now, the punch is subjective. That is left up to judges to decide. I heard that there's some electronic gloves in the works or coming down the pipeline. Maybe it's even been introduced and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work and what the requirements are for that to meet the punch threshold guidelines. That'll be interesting. That could really change the way the sport looks depending on how that plays out. Okay, so punch is 1 point. A kick, standard kick to the body, like a roundhouse kick, is 2 points. A standard kick to the head is 3 points. Now, if you add a turn, you get more points, an extra 2. So if you do a turning kick to the body, like a tornado kick or back kick, that's a 4-point technique. And if you do a turning kick to the head, that is a 5-point technique. So the rules are rewarding the use of higher level, higher risk techniques in the thought that it makes the matches more exciting. And this is quite different from when it first started, where points were pretty much equalized, and I think it went to a little bit more points for a head kick, like 2 points for a head kick, 1 point for a body kick, and it kept kind of layering on different layers of complexity in the hopes of making the match more exciting. All right, so that's how the scoring works, and it kind of depends on the setup of the tournament. You can see matches run in different ways. Sometimes a point is simply given to who won the match, who won the round, and it's like the best out of 3 rounds wins. Sometimes it's an accumulation of points throughout the rounds. I've seen that done both ways. It seems the most common one now is they award a single point to the round winner, and it's the best out of 3 that wins the match. But those are generally the things you're looking to do from a scoring standpoint. Daryl, I hope that answers your question about competition. And yeah, I think that's a really good thing, especially if you're a beginner, to be aware of so you know what you're training for. All right, from Martial Arts Fitness USA. What's the difference between ITF and WTF? These organizations split, I think it was probably in the 70s, maybe even a little before. My history on that is a touch rusty on when General Choi separated from, it might have been the KTA at the time. They didn't see eye to eye. Anyway, he formed his own organization called the ITF, and so the WT is the one associated with the Olympics, the Taeguk Poomsae. The ITF has an entirely different sport layout, and I'm not a practitioner of this system, so I'm really not very qualified to speak to it. But one of the key differences in the version of their sport is they use punching to the head, and they, to my knowledge, do not have an electronic scoring system. Further, they practice a different type of Poomsae altogether. So their Poomsae follow entirely different sequences, and they incorporate something known as sine wave, where the performers sort of bounce up and down in a sine wave pattern to enhance the power of their Poomsae, or so they say. So they're really quite different. In fact, the next part of your question you ask, so also my Taekwondo school I went to was bought by a karate school. The only real difference I could see was different kata. We called kata patterns. For me, Taekwondo and Karate seem the same, and my Taekwondo master went and opened a karate school. Are they interchangeable? So that's interesting. I think ITF is a lot more different from karate, I think at least in the form of its basics, like its patterns, than WT Taekwondo. WT Taekwondo movements in terms of the Poomsae, or basics, are very, very similar to something like Shotokan Karate and some of the other karate systems. Whereas the sine wave of ITF, along with some of the different techniques, make it, I think, a little bit more standout, a little bit more different from some of the other karate systems. So in other words, if I went and trained in a Shotokan Karate dojo, there's going to be some differences certainly in the movements. But generally speaking, a lot of the mechanics in how I move my body around are going to be really similar. You know, the staying level as you step forward. Whereas the foundational method of generating power, at least my understanding of it, is different in ITF, and it's going to feel very foreign to someone who studies Shotokan, whereas if they move into a WT program and practice WT Poomsae, I think there's going to be only some minor variations that they're going to have to make in their technique. Is it interchangeable? It depends on how, I'm going to say this, it depends on your personality. If Taekwondo is simply kicking and punching, the name Taekwondo, we could say, means the way of the hand and foot, then all karate is Taekwondo. And you could say that because Taekwondo comes directly from karate, all Taekwondo is karate. What makes karate karate or Taekwondo Taekwondo? That's really hard to define. And of course, these are living arts, so they're constantly changing. If you try to pin one down and say it's exactly these things, and that's different 2 years down the road, you see the problem. It's very hard to define what a living art actually is. But I think we could say that there's some commonalities that we tend to associate with these things, okay? One is the patterns. All right. Two is that there's some format of striking heavy sparring. It doesn't mean there's no throwing or takedowns, but that striking is emphasized, okay? So there's some form of patterns and some form of striking heavy sparring. And the system itself is generally thought to be more of a striking system than anything else, sort of with throws and locks and things like that added in as a secondary strategy or as a way to enhance the striking. So even if you're doing something like Okinawan Karate, which is very lock and throw heavy, you could say that the purpose of the lock or throw is often to enhance your strike. Whereas in something like Jiu-Jitsu or Judo, the lock or throw is the purpose of the system. Now again, all of this depends very heavily on where you're studying and your personal approach to things, so it's very hard to pin down exactly what is what. But I would say if you're not too anal about things, if you have a flexible personality, then they are in many ways interchangeable. You could even say that if you use Korean words, it's Taekwondo, and if you use Japanese words, it's karate. But again, this is personality dependent. Some of you, I don't think, would agree. All right, from my producer, Daryl, again. Do you have any favorite books that really changed your thoughts on things or had a positive life impact from the Eastern culture of Confucianism, Taoism, or Buddhism? This kind of curves from Taekwondo specifically, although Most schools have student creeds, and as you know, we aim to develop mind and body with martial arts. A book that I really remember enjoying is called Zen in the Martial Arts. It's a really short, quick read, but I think it has a lot of good concepts in it. And there's another one that, so I'd have to dig it out. I have it in a box right now, and I should have dug it out before I recorded because the name is eluding me a little bit. But it's all these writings of, I think it's called Masters of Budo. And it's these writings of various Japanese martial artists and Zen teachers as applied to the martial arts. And I really like that one as well. Both are short reads. Some of these, it's been a really long time since I've read, and it might be interesting to go back and read them again. I remember Doug Cook has the book Taekwondo, I think it's Way of the Modern Warrior. I'm probably getting that wrong again, but you can look up Doug Cook's book on Taekwondo philosophy, and it has a lot of stuff like that in there. And I remember reading that quite early in my Taekwondo training and finding it beneficial at the time. I'm fortunate too in that my instructor wrote a book on martial arts that was really quite informative, and he made a lot of different pieces of memorization that we would go through during our exams that I think was quite educational in our martial arts journey. So that was influential as well, certainly. But Zen in the martial arts, that's the one that jumps out the most to me. From Cindy Pearson. Another training moment I've taught two different ways. Front stretch kick. Should you keep the supporting leg's foot flat on the floor, or should you raise to the ball of the foot? Which is better? It's interesting because the stretch kick, I don't think you could say that's an official technique of Taekwondo. So it's an augmenting exercise. I say that because I don't think you could open any official documentation, like from the Kokyuan, that says this is how a front stretch kick could be done. If I'm wrong on that, link a video or a document in the comments. I'd love to see that. Okay, my thoughts on it is that the advantage of those outside of getting some of the stretching movement is that you're, through this more of a swinging action, you're achieving this height that you can't achieve as easily with the more confined movements of something like a front kick. So because you have a little bit more swinging force, you're taking your body through a wider range of motion than what it's used to. Okay, so I think it's designed to enhance your ability to front kick by teaching your body this wider range of motion and specifically stretching for that range of motion in a dynamic way. So what I would say is try to make it resemble the front kick as much as possible. So what do we do when we front kick? We don't really lift up on the foot so much as pivot the foot slightly. Now, that means you do have to lift up a little bit. It's a small amount. It's not very visible. And that allows you to push the kicking side of the hip forward so you're opening up in the same way you would for a front kick. If you're picking way up, so you're lifting the ball of your, or the heel, I should say, that you're lifting the heel way off of the floor to try to gain a few extra inches in kicking height, I don't think that serves any mechanical enhancement function. So I wouldn't do that. It's definitely a no-no in all the other kicks. So I would try to train in context when using the stretch kicks and make them mimic the kicks they're designed to enhance as much as possible. That would be my approach. Good question. I believe that is all of the questions for this week's Topic Tuesday. Thank you for everyone who wrote in. I did get one other from Martial Arts Fitness USA about how many Taekwondo Grandmasters there are, and I'm afraid I have no idea. So if anyone knows how many Taekwondo Grandmasters there are, you can leave that in the comments, and then we'll all learn something. But I don't know. So that's it for comments. Reminder, Topic Tuesday exists because of you guys. Right now, it mostly exists because of Daryl, my producer. So if you want to contribute to Topic Tuesday, if you want to design the next episode, well, you get down there in the comments and type away, and that will inform me as to what you want discussed. And don't forget, I have a website, tkdguide.com, that has a lot of free training material on it. So visit that, and until next time, enjoy your training.